A day before my daughter's wedding, I said, "I can't wait for you to get married tomorrow." My wife chuckled. "What? The wedding happened yesterday." My daughter showed me her phone. There were photos of everyone there. My wife shrugged. "Yes, I forgot to tell you, haha." I left them without a word, but they were the ones who regretted it. I should have known. Looking back now, all the signs were there, little moments, offhand comments, subtle shifts in behavior. Had I been paying attention, I would have realized exactly where I stood in my own family. But I wasn't paying attention. I was too busy being the provider, the dependable one, the fool who thought love and sacrifice were enough to keep a family together. I was wrong. Let me introduce myself. My name is Malcolm. I'm 58 years old, and for the better part of my life, I did what a good husband and father was supposed to do. I worked hard, I built a life for my family, I provided, protected, and made sure they had more than I ever did growing up. I wasn't born into wealth, no silver spoon, no inheritance waiting for me at the end of some trust fund. I worked for everything. I started at a small accounting firm, climbing my way up the corporate ladder while Deborah, my wife, stayed home to raise our daughter, Sophia. It was a role we both agreed on. She wanted to be there for Sophia full time, and I wanted to make sure they never had to worry about money. So I worked hard, late nights at the office, missed weekends, skipped vacations, all of it to ensure my family had the best. I bought us a comfortable house in Rosewood Heights, a quiet suburban neighborhood where kids rode their bikes down the street, and families gathered for Sunday barbecues. I made sure Sophia went to the best private schools, paid for every extracurricular activity she wanted. And when the time came, I wrote the check for her entire college tuition, debt-free, no loans, just a father taking care of his daughter. And I never once asked for a thank you. You see, I never needed gratitude. That wasn't why I did it. I did it because they were my family, my wife, my daughter. They were my world. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Maybe it was subtle at first. Small moments I brushed off because surely my own wife and daughter wouldn't take me for granted. Like the way Deborah started making financial decisions without me. Small at first, an expensive piece of furniture here, a last-minute vacation there. Whenever I questioned it, she'd wave me off, saying, "You can afford it, Malcolm. Why are you making a big deal?" Or the way Sophia's gratitude became expectation. She never hesitated to ask for money, new clothes, trips with friends, an apartment in the city. But the words "thank you, Dad" became rare, almost non-existent. Then there was the wedding. When Sophia got engaged to Tyler, a corporate attorney from a well-off family, I was thrilled for her. I offered to pay for the wedding, despite Tyler's parents insisting they could handle half. "No," I had said, smiling at my daughter. "This is my gift to you. I want you to have the wedding of your dreams." I should have seen it then, the shift in Sophia's expression, the way her eyes flickered toward her mother, as if silently confirming something between them. I should have paid attention when Deborah started making all the decisions without asking for my input, the venue, the guest list, the catering, all handled by them, while I signed the checks like some faceless sponsor. I should have noticed the way they never talked about the wedding when I was around. But I didn't, because why would I? Why would I ever think that my own wife and daughter would exclude me from the very wedding I paid for? I ignored the signs. I told myself it was just pre-wedding stress, that they'd include me when it mattered. I was wrong. A day before what I thought was the wedding, I walked into the kitchen, smiled at Deborah, and said, "I can't wait for the wedding tomorrow." And that's when she laughed. Not a nervous chuckle, not a guilty giggle, a full-blown amused chuckle, as if I had just told the funniest joke she'd ever heard. "What?" she said, still smiling. "The wedding happened yesterday." That moment, that exact moment, split my life into two parts. Before that moment, I was Malcolm, the devoted husband and father, the provider, the man who did everything for his family. After that moment, I became something else. Because standing there in my own kitchen, staring at my wife's smug expression, I felt something inside me snap. Not in rage, not in heartbreak, but in cold, quiet realization. They had never planned to invite me. This wasn't some scheduling mistake. They had deliberately left me out. I turned to Sophia, waiting for her to correct her mother. She didn't. Instead, she hesitated, then picked up her phone, tapped the screen a few times, and held it up for me to see. There they were, all of them. Deborah, Sophia, Tyler, the in-laws, my siblings, my nieces and nephews. Smiling, laughing, celebrating, at a wedding I paid for. Without me. My heart pounded in my chest, but my face remained calm. I looked at my wife, the woman I had spent more than 30 years of my life with, the woman I had built a home for, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally. She shrugged, a casual, dismissive shrug, like I was some distant acquaintance they had forgotten to call. "Yes, I forgot to tell you," she said. She said it like it was nothing, like I was nothing. That was the moment I knew. They didn't just take me for granted. They didn't just see me as the wallet, the provider, the necessary burden in their perfect little lives. They saw me as irrelevant. I set my coffee mug down on the counter, carefully. Without a word, without a reaction. Deborah raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to explode, to yell, to demand an explanation. Sophia shifted uncomfortably, sensing that I wasn't reacting the way she expected. I didn't give them the satisfaction. I turned around, walked to the hallway, grabbed my coat from the rack, and stepped outside into the cold air. No yelling, no questioning, no begging to be included. Because in that moment, I realized something they had failed to consider. I had spent my whole life taking care of them. But they had never once considered what would happen if I decided to stop. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my messages. No missed calls, no texts. I wasn't an afterthought. I wasn't a thought at all. I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and whispered to myself, "Let's see how much they laugh when I walk away for good." Because that's exactly what I was about to do. And they were about to regret every second of it. I stood outside my own house, the cold air biting at my skin, but it was nothing compared to the chill that had settled deep inside me. I should have been angry, furious, heartbroken, but I felt none of those things. Instead, I felt empty. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that I had spent my entire life believing in an illusion. An illusion of love, family, loyalty, I had built my world around them, sacrificed for them, trusted them, only to find out I was never truly part of theirs. They hadn't forgotten me. They had excluded me. On purpose. And that fact settled in my bones like an unbearable weight, heavier than any exhaustion I had ever felt before.
Now comment update to tag you on part 2.
Update. A day before my daughter's wedding, I said, I can't wait for you to get married tomorrow. My wife chuckled. What? The wedding happened yesterday. My daughter showed me her phone. There were photos of everyone there. My wife shrugged. Guess I forgot to tell you. Haha. I left them without a word. But they were the ones who regretted it. Part 2. I stared at my phone, my fingers numb from both the cold and the silent rage curling in my gut. No missed calls, no texts, no last-minute explanations. Nothing, not even a fake attempt to cover up what they had done. I exhaled slowly, watching my breath cloud in the winter air, and did something I never thought I'd do. I opened my banking app for the first time in decades. I looked at my finances not as a provider, not as a husband or father, but as a man who had been used, a man who had been nothing more than an ATM to his own family. There it was, every mortgage payment, every credit card bill, every check sent to Sophia, every monthly deposit into Deborah's personal account, all done by me for them. And they had the audacity to throw a wedding without me. I inhaled sharply, my fingers tightening around my phone. As I scrolled through my transactions, the wedding payments, every single venue deposit, catering expense, floral arrangement, dress fitting, and luxury honeymoon package had been covered by me. And yet they had looked me in the eye, laughed in my face, and acted like I was irrelevant. I had funded an event I wasn't even considered worthy enough to attend. My mind was running, piecing everything together, and with each realization, something inside me hardened. This wasn't just a moment of forgetfulness. This was accidental. This was calculated. I turned around and walked back toward the house, my steps slow, deliberate. I wasn't sure what I expected to find when I walked back inside. Maybe a sliver of remorse. Maybe even a half-hearted attempt at an apology. But when I stepped through the front door, all I heard was laughter. Deborah's light, careless chuckle, Sophia's amused giggle. I stopped just before entering the dining room, listening. Dad's going to be fine, Sophia was saying, her voice casual, unconcerned. He always gets over things. Exactly, Deborah agreed. You know how he is. He sulks for a while, then he moves on. I told you, honey, he wouldn't have fit in at the wedding anyway. It was elegant. You know how stiff he can be. My blood turned to ice. Elegant, stiff. I took a slow, measured breath and stepped into the room. The second they saw me, the conversation stopped. Sophia stiffened, her lips pressing together. Deborah looked up at me, her face smooth, unreadable. They weren't guilty. They were waiting for me to act the way they expected, angry at first, but eventually forgiving, because that's what I had always done. I let things go. I kept the peace. I swallowed my hurt, because I thought that's what family was supposed to do. Not this time. So I said, keeping my voice steady, you threw a wedding without me. Sophia sighed, already tired of the conversation she had barely participated in. Dad, please don't make this dramatic. I arched an eyebrow. Dramatic? I wasn't even invited to my own daughter's wedding. It wasn't like that. Deborah cut in smoothly. We just figured. No, I interrupted, my voice dangerously calm. You didn't forget you decided I didn't belong. No one spoke. I looked at Sophia. Do you have any idea what you've done? I asked. She shrugged. Dad, you're acting like we abandoned you. It was just a wedding. I'm still your daughter. You're still my father. Nothing changes. Nothing changes. I let those words sink in, the sheer audacity of them. They had excluded me, mocked me behind my back, used me, and still expected me to continue providing for them as if nothing had happened. I was done, completely, entirely done. Right, I said softly, stepping back from the table. Nothing changes. They didn't notice the shift in my tone. They didn't realize I had just made the biggest decision of my life. Deborah took a sip of her wine. Malcolm, don't be childish. You're making a big deal out of nothing. A big deal out of nothing, I repeated. Sophia rolled her eyes. Dad, come on, we had limited seats and Mom thought, I repeated, so you had no say in your own wedding guest list. Sophia hesitated. And that's when I saw it. She hadn't cared enough to argue. She hadn't cared enough to fight for me. I nodded slowly, stepping back toward the hallway. Got it. Deborah raised an eyebrow. Where are you going? I need some air, I said simply. I grabbed my coat again, walked outside, and did what I should have done years ago. I opened my banking app again, and one by one I started shutting it all down. The mortgage payments stopped, the credit cards in Deborah's name canceled, the monthly deposits into Sophia's account. The inheritance fund I had set up for her revoked. They didn't need me at the wedding. Let's see how well they did without my money either. I stood on the porch, taking in the quiet night, feeling lighter than I had in years. They thought I was predictable. They thought I would always bend, always forgive, always stay. But they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated just how much I could take. And they were about to find out what it felt like when the man they had stopped playing the fool. Because as far as I was concerned, I was done being their ATM, and I had no plans of looking back. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the house I had spent the last 30 years building, the house that had seen birthdays, anniversaries, first steps, and late-night family dinners. Home. Or at least that's what I had thought it was. But homes are built on love, on mutual respect, on the belief that you belong. And I didn't belong here anymore, not to them, to them. I was a bank account with legs, a walking convenience, the one they turned to when bills needed paying, when debts needed clearing, when dreams needed funding. But when it came to including me in their lives, I was disposable. And the worst part, one had let it happen. For years I had excused it, ignored it, rationalized it. I had told myself that's just how families are. I had let myself believe that as long as I kept giving, kept sacrificing, they would see my worth. But they had seen my worth, they just never valued it. A cold, sharp realization settled in my chest as I sat in the driveway, the glow of the house's windows illuminating the stark truth. This wasn't a mistake. They weren't sorry, and they weren't going to change. So why the hell should I stay? I reached for my phone, opening the contact list. My lawyer's number was near the top. I stared at it. I could start right now, call him, tell him to start the paperwork, divorce, financial restructuring, asset liquidation, Everything I had built for them, the house, the credit cards, the safety net, it all existed because of me. And if I walked away, if I truly completely walked away, they had nothing. I let out a slow breath, pressing my thumb against my phone screen. But I didn't call not yet, because I wasn't done not yet. I pushed the door open, stepping back into the freezing night air. My breath fogged in front of me as I walked back to the house, my footsteps deliberate, my heartbeat steady. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. When I walked inside, Deborah was still at the dining table, sipping her wine like nothing had happened. Sophia had moved to the couch, scrolling through her phone, her face as blank as ever. I stood in the entryway watching them. They didn't even flinch, didn't look guilty, didn't even try to explain themselves. Because why would they? They thought they had already won, that I would get over it like I always did, that I would sulk for a few days, then go back to paying for their lives like nothing had happened. I let the silence stretch. Then finally, Deborah sighed, setting her glass down with a soft clink. Are you done being dramatic? I smiled, not because I was amused, not because I found any of this remotely funny, but because I knew something she didn't. I wasn't being dramatic, I was being done. Oh, I'm done, all right. Her eyebrows knitted together, the first flicker of something that almost looked like unease crossing her face. Look, Malcolm, she said, exasperation in her voice. I know you're upset, but it was just a wedding. You're acting like we burned the house down. I tilted my head slightly. That's an interesting way to put it, Deborah. Because in a way you did. She scoffed. Oh, come on. I turned my gaze to Sophia. And you? I asked, nothing to say. Sophia barely looked up from her phone.
Now comment update to tag you on part 3.
Update. A day before my daughter's wedding, I said, I can't wait for you to get married tomorrow. My wife chuckled. What? The wedding happened yesterday. My daughter showed me her phone. There were photos of everyone there. My wife shrugged. Guess I forgot to tell you. Haha. I left them without a word, but they were the ones who regretted it. Part 3. Dad, you're taking this way too seriously. We didn't mean to hurt you, Mom thought. Mom thought, I repeated. Sophia hesitated, then shrugged. Look, I just went along with it. It wasn't personal. Not personal. My own daughter had chosen to go along with excluding me from her wedding, had smiled for the cameras, danced under the lights, toasted to her new life, all while knowing I was sitting at home, thinking I still had a place in her world, and it wasn't personal. I felt something deep inside me go quiet. No, all right, I said simply. Deborah frowned. All right, that's it. I turned, walked down the hall, and into our bedroom. I didn't slam the door, didn't rip things off the walls, didn't throw things into a suitcase, because this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment reaction. This was deliberate, planned, final. I pulled open the closet, grabbed a duffel bag, and started packing. Shirts, pants, the essentials. I didn't need much because I wasn't planning on coming back. Behind me, I heard Deborah's voice flowing in from the hallway. Oh, stop it, Malcolm. You're not leaving. Where would you even go? I zipped up the bag, swung it over my shoulder, and stepped into the doorway. I don't know, I said honestly, but wherever it is, it'll be better than here. For the first time that night, I saw it. The first real flicker of fear in her eyes, because she hadn't expected this. She had expected resistance, expected anger, expected me to throw a fit but eventually stay. She hadn't expected me to walk away. I brushed past her, feeling the weight lift off my chest with every step I took toward the front door. Malcolm, she called, sharper now. I didn't respond. I didn't even look back. I just walked, one step after another, and then I reached the front door, wrapped my fingers around the handle, and opened it. The cold air rushed in, cutting through the warmth of the house, our house. No, not anymore. Not ours, not mine. Just theirs. And they could keep it because I was done. Completely, entirely done. I stepped out, letting the door shut behind me with a soft click, and I didn't look back, not once. Not when my phone started buzzing in my pocket. Not when Deborah called my name again, her voice edging towards something almost panicked. Not when I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled away from the house I had built with my own hands. I had walked away from a lifetime of sacrifice, and for the first time in 30 years, I felt free. They thought they had won. They thought they could laugh it off, brush it aside, let time smooth over the wounds they inflicted. But they had no idea what was coming next, because the thing about taking someone for granted, you never realize, is what they truly gave you, until they take it all back. I drove through the quiet streets of Rosewood Heights, my fingers gripping the steering wheel, tighter than necessary. The streetlights cast long shadows across the road, their glow blurring slightly, as my vision swam with the weight of the evening. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even shocked anymore. I was just done. Done pretending, done excusing, done sacrificing for people who had made it abundantly clear that my worth to them began and ended with how much money I could hand over. It was a strange thing to realize that the family you had built your entire world around had never truly considered you a part of theirs, and now they were about to feel what that meant. As I pulled into the parking lot of a small motel on the outskirts of town, I reached for my phone, not to call Deborah, not to respond to the barrage of messages and missed calls that had started the moment I walked out the door. I had no interest in what they had to say. Instead, I opened my banking app. For years, I had handled our finances alone. It had been a necessity, really. Deborah had never cared about managing money, and Sophia had never been interested in understanding where all the luxuries she enjoyed came from. So, I had managed it all. The mortgage, the credit cards, the savings accounts, the monthly deposits into Sophia's checking account, the household expenses Deborah never even glanced at, the medical insurance that covered not just my family, but her mother as well. I had funded their entire world, and they had laughed in my face. That ends tonight. With a few taps, I froze the joint account Deborah had access to, her credit cards canceled, the mortgage auto payments stopped, the monthly allowance Sophia received like clockwork, gone. I moved my personal savings into a new, separate account, one with only my name on it. I wasn't a fool. I knew Deborah would see the changes soon. She'd call the bank, try to override the restrictions, throw a fit when she realized that for the first time in her life, she had no control over me. And then she'd panic, and that's what I was waiting for. I set the phone down, leaning back against the cheap motel headboard, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in my life, I felt light. I had spent decades giving. Tonight, for the first time ever, I had taken back, and they were about to realize just how much I'd given them. The first signs of desperation, I woke up to 26 missed calls. I let them sit there untouched as I went about my morning. By the time I had showered, grabbed coffee from the lobby, and stepped outside into the crisp morning air, the messages had started rolling in. First Deborah. Malcolm, what the hell is going on? My card just got declined at the store. Did you forget to pay the mortgage? I just got an email about a late fee. Call me now. Okay, this isn't funny. My accounts are frozen. I can't access anything. Fix this. Then Sophia. Dad, my card isn't working. Did something happen with the bank? Dad, answer me. Mom's freaking out. Okay, seriously, what's going on? I have bills to pay. Are you mad about the wedding? Come on, Dad, it wasn't personal. You're making a huge deal out of nothing. Oh, there it was, the entitlement, the casual dismissal, the assumption that I would cave. They still didn't get it. They still thought I was playing a game. I smirked, sipping my coffee as I scrolled to the next message. Deborah again. Malcolm, you are acting childish. You can't just cut us off like this. We are your family. There it was, the family card. I exhaled slowly, setting the phone down. They weren't worried about me. They weren't calling because they had realized their mistake. They were panicking because they had just lost their safety net, and they had no idea what to do. First phone call, it didn't take long. By noon, my phone was ringing again. I let it go to voicemail the first 2 times, but by the third, I was curious. I answered. Malcolm. Deborah's voice was shrill, breathless. I could hear noise in the background, probably the bank. Morning, Deborah, I said calmly, sipping my coffee. There was a pause. She hadn't expected me to sound so at ease. What the hell is going on? She snapped. Why can't I access our accounts? Why is everything frozen? I hummed. That's weird. Malcolm, this isn't funny. Who said I was joking? Silence. Then quieter, more controlled. Okay, I get that you're upset, but this is ridiculous. You're not thinking straight. Oh, I'm thinking perfectly straight, I said, probably for the first time in years. Another pause, then a scoff. So what? You're punishing us. That's what this is. No, Deborah, I said, my voice steady. This isn't punishment. This is me resigning. Resigning, she repeated. From my role as your personal bank. A sharp inhale, then anger. You can't just walk away from your responsibilities, Malcolm. I laughed. Actually laughed. Responsibilities, I echoed. You mean like the responsibility of paying for a wedding I wasn't even invited to? More silent. She had no response for that. And that silence, that was the moment I knew I had won. I didn't need to explain myself, didn't need to argue, didn't need to yell. They had played their hand, and now they were watching everything crumble. The aftermath. By the end of the week, Deborah had maxed out every credit card she still had access to. The mortgage was officially 2 weeks late. Sophia's lifestyle had come to a screeching halt. And me, I was fine, better than fine. I was free. I hadn't realized just how much weight I had been carrying until I set it all down. They had spent years using me, draining me, expecting me to keep giving without hesitation. They thought I was predictable. They thought I would always come back. But they had made one critical mistake. They had forced me to see the truth. And once I had seen it, there was no going back. So as I sat in my rented apartment, staring at the new life unfolding in front of me, I smiled. Because this wasn't the end of the story. No, this was just the beginning of their regret. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who had to fix it. The thing about people who take you for granted is that they never see the consequences coming. They assume you'll always be there, waiting, ready, willing to forgive, to fix things, to continue playing your role. For years, I had been the provider, the problem solver, the man who always came through. But when I walked away, when I stopped playing their game, that's when the real panic set in. Because for the first time in their lives, they had to fend for themselves. They were not prepared.
Now comment update to tag you on part 4.